Hey everyone, my name is Luke Eidenschink. I'm a traditional artist specializing in pen and ink illustration. And in this four-part video series, I'm going to take you step by step through the illustration process as I create this fantasy drawing. I'm going to be using all the materials that you see over my shoulder. So let's go through those materials in a little bit more detail, and then we can get started on the project. All right, so this is everything that I'll be using on this drawing. Quality paper is probably the most important part of any drawing, and I like to use the Strathmore Bristol. This is Bristol 500. They also make a Bristol 300. I use both of them. I especially like the 500 because of this super smooth plate surface. What that means for dip pens especially is that that pointed nib is going to glide on the smooth surface, much less likely to get snagged. And I also like the quality, nice thick paper that's going to hold a crisp ink line. That ink line is not going to feather out or bleed at all, as long as you have a good quality ink, which I have here. A couple different kinds that I like to use. I'll probably be using this Calli. It's a really nice jet black India ink, you can see here, but it really makes a nice crisp black line. I love it. This FW acrylic ink, also good. I especially like the fact that it comes in a big jug because, as you can imagine, I go through a ton of ink. So a lot of my drawings, I use a pencil to lay out a basic plan before I start inking. So I'm going to use a pencil, and the lines eventually do get erased when I'm done with the inking, so I have that eraser. And last but not least, of course, I do have a variety of dip pens that I will be using to apply that ink. So there you have it. Those are the materials I'll be using. Now let's get started. So here's the initial sketch that I did, my concept for this drawing. And I'm using just a plain old HB pencil here, nothing too fancy. Now, my initial concept sketches tend to be real rough. Nothing polished about this. I'm just getting the idea down. And for purposes of this video, what I'm doing here is I'm using that initial sketch on the Lightbox to transfer that concept sketch to a nicer piece of paper. So this is the Bristol 500 paper. And I took the opportunity to shift the image a little bit on the paper. So I've got the paper kind of off center a bit just to move that image. And I'm using the same pencil, just refining the sketch a bit. The lines are a little bit cleaner. I still like to keep the lines sort of sketchy though, because I've found that keeping the lines sketchy allows me, when I ink, to kind of preserve the initial concept. A lot of times when you have a concept for something and then redraw it, it just doesn't look quite as good as that initial concept. So I do what I can to preserve that concept as best I can. So in this stage, as I mentioned, I'm keeping those lines just a little bit cleaner. And I'm also thinking about the various tones that I'm going to be putting in, what sort of marks I'm going to make in different areas of the drawing to set certain areas off, which direction the lines are going to run, what kind of patterns that I'll have. And that just comes from inking for many, many years, sort of thinking ahead and planning in this stage. Even though I might not necessarily be showing that, I'm definitely thinking about it. And you can see a little bit of it here with these trees. The lines that I'm making, I'm thinking about how I'm going to shade those trees. whether I'll use hatching or cross hatching, that type of thing. But it's really about the overall shape, the design, the layout of this concept. That's the main thing. And here it is, pretty much finished and ready to start the inking process. I'll be using this Calli ink. As I mentioned, it's a really nice jet black, and it's a very free-flowing ink. It does not clog easily. Other inks that I've used tend to thicken up pretty fast. Calli ink stays free-flowing for a long time. Now, my inking style tends to be one of a lot of single direction lines. You won't find a lot of cross hatching in my work. I do use it, and I will be using it in this drawing, but I generally use it sparingly and to describe a certain texture. Most of my work will be lines like you see me putting in here on this hat, where it's conveying not only the tone and the shape, but also the direction of the line is really important. I feel that it conveys a certain amount of emotion to the piece. And you'll see that more as I go on through the drawing, that I'm really using the lines to show a movement and a flow. I'm showing that with the shape of, say, the flowing robe, the shape of the hat, but I'm also reflecting that in the actual lines that I'm using to depict those things. So keep an eye on that as I move forward and see how I use those lines to show motion. Another thing I do a lot is I go back and I thicken my lines. I'll start with a thin line and I'll come back, I'll look at it and I'll come back and thicken it as I need to create more shadow, more depth, or more emphasis on a certain area. Notice the difference between the way that I'm drawing the lines of the robe here and the lines of this wooden staff. Now, the lines on the staff are, of course, depicting wood. Different texture for a different material. And there's many different ways that a person could ink the staff or the robe. The key is that you depict them in different ways so that the eye can look and see this is a different material than that. And it's almost like learning a different language, or more accurately, inventing your own language. So that's it for part one. We did our concept, penciled the layout, and started the inking process. In part two, we'll continue the inking process on the foreground. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.